to the Firing the Man podcast, episode 158. On today's episode, we have the privilege to interview Ryan Flannagan. Ryan Flannagan is the CEO and founder of Nuanced Media, an international e-commerce marketing agency. Ryan has over 15 years of experience in e-commerce, multi-channel digital marketing, and third-party marketing. As founder and CEO of Nuanced Media, Ryan has worked with hundreds of companies to establish best practices, focusing on the 20% of effort that produces 80% of the revenue. We're really excited to get to share Ryan's story and knowledge with the listeners today. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Hey, Ken, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's give the audience a little bit of background about you, maybe some prior job experiences, life story.
Sure. Nuance has been about 12 years now, so I'll kind of start out there. Before I worked at a law office, I had another venture that burned in a haze of fire. So we'll just start with Nuanced, right? So
Sure.
Founded Nuanced in 2010. Been doing e-commerce marketing for a long time. We're doing more of a generalist marketing and, as well as e-commerce. And in about 2017, we helped a client sell on the Amazon platform about $18 million in 6 weeks. And we said, hey, there's something to this. Why don't we really continue to dive more into Amazon compared to general e-commerce, which we still play with general e-commerce quite a bit. But we said, hey, there's something to this. Why don't we focus on that? And we've been diving hard in Amazon ever since with that. I got a boutique agency, got about 20 full-time throughout the United States, and I have a number of contractors internationally as well. So that's kind of where we play and what we do. I'm at Nuance. What we really kind of found ourselves on is creating win-win scenarios for us and our partners. We're not really a churn and burn agency, unfortunately. There are a lot of churn and burns out there, so we won't really work with anybody unless we kind of do an assessment and we make sure we can make you money and really have a long-term partnership, because I don't really want to burn out my employees working on people that aren't going to win in the first place. And I want to make sure that I can sleep at night. So those are some of the things that we do. If everybody's winning, it's a significantly better relationship.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Win-wins are always the best case for everyone. So sounds like a decent sized agency, been going for quite a long time and focusing primarily on Amazon. So.
Yep. And we primarily focus on growth-driven advertising, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, but we do also listing optimization, UCG videos, and all that type of stuff, because as you know, Amazon's getting a lot more holistic in nature, just like e-commerce is in general, right? We can dive into a lot of that stuff later, but I didn't want to kind of mention that.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And if you don't have just like a house, if you don't have a solid foundation, you're not going to have anything on top of that. And so ads are not going to work unless your listing is optimized. And so, right. As we're talking about optimizing listings, what are the top 5 ways to increase an Amazon conversion rate?
So the first and foremost thing is make sure your listing is optimized. I mean, this is kind of, everybody has heard this 50 million times, but it's worth repeating. Good content, good images, spend the extra money on images, because it's going to be what makes you add or remove. It's really going to be what makes you stand out, is having an optimized listing. This is how I kind of analyze this, or use an analogy for, is back when you used to go to Dillard's or the mall or anything, before you picked up or purchased a product, you could pick it up and hold it and feel it, right? You can't do that anymore online. And that's where the big pivot is. So what you want to do with your image listings is really optimize them to the highest level, so people can almost feel it virtually as much as possible. If it was a Steinbeck novel, you'd say, I can smell it. That's the type of literature you have. So you want to do the same thing with your listings. Make it as close to somebody picking it up and touching as possible. There's also obviously the brand story that helps with a variety of different things for cross-sell and upsell for your catalog. A lot of people aren't leveraging the brand story as of yet. And then there's obviously optimized Amazon A+ or ECB content. The other thing, this is just kind of rolled out pretty recently, is if you have A+ content on 15 different listings and it's varied a bunch, you can actually apply for premium A+ content, and that means you get video featured in your A+ content and some other things. or if you go through the Launchpad capability. So those are all the type of things of really how do you build out what you're doing on your platform on that listing, and then really focusing on that kind of conversion rate from a standpoint of when people fall there or land there. The next thing that you can really do for increasing your conversion rate is advertise on the right words that are relevant to your listing. You know, one thing that we do, people don't talk about that. It's just all traffic is equal, right? But if I'm selling yoga mats and people are coming there for fireman helmets, I'm probably not going to sell a whole bunch of yoga mats, right? So one thing that we do through our process is we analyze all the data when we're kind of managing the pay-per-click campaigns through the growth-driven advertising line, and we find out what's actually converting for you. And then we update your listings based on that content, so you'll rank more organically, and we'll really lean into those keywords, right? So that's the other thing, is what type of traffic are you driving? How are you driving it? So it's not, again, kind of going back to that holistic model. It's not just the listing, you know, that's like, hey, I'm going and I'm eating right? And then your ad spend is working out, right? So if you're working out a ton and you're eating pizza every day, you're not going to lose weight or get healthy. And if you're eating right, but you're never working out, well, you're not going to hit the ultimate sales that you can do on that side either, right? So that's the way that I kind of like to look at it. We do some things with Amazon DSP, and then we can kind of get into some multi-channel things later. Cool. But listing optimization, how you're driving traffic into there, really looking at that. And then split testing is another key thing. And I have some stats for doing split testing. Split testing was rolled out on Amazon, I'd say about 6 months ago or so. And it's actually, if you have brand registry, then you can actually get access through your brand on the back end of seller. And then you can start running split tests. And it's pretty impressive with what you can do.
I want to back up a little bit before we get into split testing, because I think split testing is a whole other deep conversation too. So you had mentioned, so this podcast is going to air, like I said, probably in January. And so if you're listening to this, Ryan just spit out a bunch of gold nuggets on, hey, start the year right, go and do an audit on your listing, make sure you have all this stuff dialed in, you know, and if you don't have it even created, just get something created. And I wanted to ask you about the, is it premium EBC? I remember seeing that we had applied for one of our brands on there and it got approved, but we haven't uploaded anything to it yet. So you're saying that the premium one, you can put a video inside the EBC?
Yeah, you get a few more modules. So like typically you're limited to 5. And don't quote me on this, I think you get 7, so you get 2 more modules. And you also can put video in there, right? And video, Amazon's leaning heavy into video. If we see any indication of what's working in social media channels and just kind of brand in general, video is God. You know, user generated content in particular. So Amazon's realizing this. They say, hey, if we have more video on here, how do we can actually increase our conversion rates more, and then we can make more money ourselves. So how do we do that? So that's why they're slowly kind of rolling this out. Gotcha.
Yeah, that it makes sense. And I think it's kind of interesting how Amazon, they only allow, at least for now, I've heard whispers that they're going to start charging for EBC and things like that, but for now it's free. And for now it's free, use it. But the piece where I think it was 15 approved EBCs or something to unlock it. And so they're kind of trying to incentivize sellers to utilize EBC because they know it's going to convert better. And then they're giving you kind of a bonus if you're doing that at a high level. So, which is the irony too, because what we see with a lot of the partners that we work with is, I call it the Pareto principle on steroids. The Pareto principle being like 20% makes 80% of your revenue. On Amazon, we typically see that it's, 2% makes 98% of your revenue, right? Yeah. So like if you're a seller that's making 100,000 to $1 million, sometimes that's 2 listings that are making 100,000 to $1 million, right? Right. And you got 10 other ones that are doing 30,000 a year or something like that, right? So how do you, when you got the winners and you know the winners, how do you take the time and the logic, particularly because Amazon's getting more competitive, to make sure that they continue to win
and you own that like top 3 organic position or whatnot, right?
Absolutely. And one thing to add to that is like you mentioned, the 80-20 Pareto principle is like, and especially for, let's say, the solopreneurs that are listening to this, if you have 10 listings and like Ryan mentioned, you're going to have a couple like leaders, right, in that revenue category. And if you have a limited amount of time to work on your business, go optimize those two that are bringing in the 80%, and increase your conversion rate. Go into your business reports, pull up your conversion rates, optimize those, and split test them, and you'll gain, that 80-20. You'll be on the right side of that 80-20 instead of
And
spiraling.
Ken, something that we do to kind of speak to this is like before we engage with any existing seller, particularly sellers that have a larger catalog, is we kind of do what we call an Amazon action plan. And that's a big catalog analysis to identify which ones are your top sellers. And sometimes it's not just about your top sellers, but it's aggregating things in the right product families, right? So most categories on Amazon, if you take 5 variants and all those 5 variants have 20 reviews, when you aggregate them, that parent listing will have 100 reviews, right? So there is some stratagem behind this of looking at your existing catalog and saying, what actually fits into this? Can we make if there are 2 variations, let's say you're selling shoes and you have 5 different product families of shoes, and you have a sneaker, a flip-flop, and 3 other variations. We'll just call them A, B, and C. Well, what you may be able to do if they're in the right category, in the same category, is make those styles and then color variations underneath them, right? So if those 5 product families had 1,000 reviews each, now your parent listing has 5,000 reviews, right? So there's some calculation, some analysis you want to look at on that, because one of the other keys to kind of going back to that conversion rate analysis question that you're saying is reviews are king, right? And if you don't have reviews on there, you're never going to make sales. And you really need to be looking at your pay-per-click competition based on who has reviews and who doesn't, right? You're never going to knock off the person that's got 30,000 reviews if you only have 100 reviews, unless you're basically giving your product away.
Right. So let's get down to the weeds a little bit. I've got a follow-up question on that. Let's say we have let's do the tennis shoes or the shoes listing, for example. We have a couple of listings in one of our portfolio companies that has like well over 100 variations. And so we've tried it a couple different ways. I want to see what your experience is. And let's say we have a listing, the tennis shoes. Let's say there's flip-flops, casual shoes, tennis shoes. Let's say there's 5 different styles, if you will. And then each of the styles have different sizes and colors. And so it makes up, let's say, 150. Now, would you rather have that listing with 150 and say, 3,000 reviews on it? Or would you rather have those broken out into, flip-flops, tennis shoes, casual, 5 separate listings with like 30? What can you speak to that? Like, have you seen?
Yeah. So there's testing in this too. So the one thing that you have to really realize is if people search for your brand, for example, if you have 150 variants in one product listing, one variant will show up in organic search, right? So you have to realize that. So you can lose a lot of brand, like self-brand defense on that. But there is a bigger argument for what's the cross-sell and the upsell of this, right? And if you aggregate those reviews, how much is that going to increase your conversion rate overall? The thing is, typically with Amazon too, you get 2 variations, right? So your second variation there was color and size. So that means when you do them, if you have a black, you'll have to have a black 8 size, 9 size, 10 size, and all that. You won't be able to do the selection on that, right? And you don't want those tiles to get too busy or anything like that as well, right? So you really have to kind of do that assessment and say, what do I think the cross-sell and the upsell opportunity is here by doing this? Is this going to affect my search results because I'm showing up, but is it really about the conversion rate, right? And what's happening on this level. So there's some internal like kind of soul searching you have to do with this. At the end of the day, what I always recommend, and this can be a nightmare on Amazon, but split testing. And particularly when you're doing product family split testing, that can be really difficult. That has to be a manual thing that you do. right? But you want to look at those product families at overall sales and what they're doing.
Um,
And then one other caveat, they do all have to be in the same category, right? So you can't put, if casual shoes and sandals are different categories on Amazon, you cannot put them in the same product family unless you start calling the sandal a shoe and change that category, right?
Okay. Sure. Yeah, that's something that we're going to be testing in the new year, a couple different ways to see. My take on it as I think splitting them up might do better in terms of revenue and sales because you're covering, like you said, more real estate on the bottom. You know, you're kind of covering up more spots. The other piece is we ran into issues split testing on Amazon. There's a maximum variation of 84. So if you have more than 84, you can't split test, and so you're kind of locked in. Like if you're optimizing your listing, then yeah, you're gonna have to keep it under that.
Well, and then the real question is what's going on with your heroes here too, because each listing has its own organic rank in Amazon, right? For different keywords and those type of things, right? So if you have 5 different heroes, each one of those will show up organically as the top one in the search result, right? But if you have 2 products that one's ranking number 2 and one's number 10 organically, then you probably don't want those in the same product family because then you're only going to have the 2 there and not the 10.
Yeah.
Right. But if you find that your black 8 size 8 shoe is the one that's ranking for everything and nothing else is really ranking, then this makes more sense from the strategic level.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's more research and definitely have to look at it from a couple different angles before deciding. But yeah, testing is key. So let's get right into split testing then. You mentioned it earlier. So how can you run split test, and which split test do you prefer? Like which ones have the highest increase in conversion rate that from your experience?
So it's not just conversion rate here, it's also click-through rate, right? So you want to be able to assess like standard marketer, right? Like, hey, let's talk about CTR, right? You know,
Sure.
but there is the levels because I'm an entrepreneur too, right? So what we find we've had the best results with so far is really testing the main image. So Amazon and their TOS, as everybody knows, it's a white background. That's varying pretty quickly. I think Amazon's realized that they may have shot themselves in the foot with that TOS. And you're seeing in different categories that people are starting to put somebody holding it or like, you know, doing these other almost lifestyle images in the main image, right?
Okay.
And it may not be on a white background. There's some other things that stand out. And we've done this test for a number of clients here, and we've gotten some pretty incredible results. So for a toy company that has a toy sword, we got 102% increase in click-through rate by putting a hand holding the sword compared to just the sword, right? Okay. For a kind of personal alarm one, by doing what we did on that, we got a 678% increase, right? By showing the alarm being pulled and kind of doing those type of things. But the interesting thing, right? We saw almost a 700% increase in click-through rate, but then we saw a 10% drop in conversion rate, right? So you go, hey, it's 6x top, it's 10 here, and then you have to kind of do the calculations and said, did I make any ground here? Right? Like, where is this? And then on the other side, for the makeup line, you know, what we did was compared to just having a lip liner there doing that, we actually showed it being applied to lips. And by doing that, because somebody can imagine themselves putting it through, we got a 64% increase in sales overall. Just by doing that one split test. Right now, Amazon automates this in the background, so you can run split tests, you can put those up, and they'll tell you the winner and all those things. Right. So this is stuff that Amazon, you know, my conspiracy theories is Amazon essentially wants to be the hub for e-commerce online. Right. No Shopify, no websites. They want to own it all. It's why they're pushing hard on the brand referral programs that you can get 10% back for most categories on a referral fee and those type of things, because they know they have a higher conversion rate than the standard Shopify store. Amazon normally converts about 5x what your typical Shopify store is doing, right? Or e-commerce store. So they're like, hey, we have better conversion rate. We want to keep driving the flywheel because we can monetize. And 5% of all e-commerce is just as good as 15% of all e-commerce out there. So how do we do that? So they've done that with a brand referral level because they know they have a higher conversion rate. The other major thing that's going on Amazon right now too is that they're getting to be more and more brand centric, right? And what they're seeing with the brand centric side of things is Amazon 3-4 years ago was literally a department store. You'd come in there, you'd search for white towels, you'd buy from white towels, and then that's all you'd do, right? What they're focusing on with the brand story, the Amazon storefront, the following level, and they're soon going to be launching, and this is actually in beta for some people, capabilities to email people who have purchased from you before. They're really becoming more of a mall, if you will, on the focus with those things. So those are all the things that you want to start thinking about while driving, while building, while doing these type of things and building out your brand on Amazon.
Sure. Yeah, those are great. And those statistics for the main image split testing are pretty impressive. So we have not tried to use lifestyle images in our main images yet.
Look at your category. Like the easiest way to do this is look at your category, see if anybody else is doing it. If somebody else is doing it, you probably now you have to check to see if you get suppression or anything like that. But
right.
Amazon's always a little risky with those things. Like don't poke the bear is a real saying for reasons, right? But we've had some pretty good success with that. The other two areas that you can split test is the product title on that. I don't really like messing with that because it just seems like innately it's going to mess with SEO, right? And that type of thing. And then you can split test the A+ content area. The A+ content area, though, is I think you have to be doing real money on a listing before you go to the A+ content area. Just because thinking through A+ content is a lot of work, and you have to really put together a high level to do that to find out if it's going to make a difference, right? Split testing the image, like low-hanging fruit, split test the image, you can pretty much turn that pretty quick and get that up. A+ content, you want to think about messaging, you want to think about the modules. There's so many different variables you could do with that. But if you have a listing that's making $500,000 a year, well, it probably makes sense to really start looking at that and see if you can increase the conversion rate by 1-2%.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have volume, then it's definitely worth it. We're seeing similar, like main images is we're lowest hanging fruit, most opportunity, EBC, and then I agree with you. We don't split test our titles. To me, it doesn't even make sense to do that. You should have.
That's a big presumption that Americans read, right? And we know we're an image-driven culture. I'll just leave it at that. Right?
Yeah. Although, and also we haven't tested it either. So if you're listening and you've tested split testing on title and you've crushed it, email us. Let us know. Because 100%. I have not heard of that from anyone yet. So I kind of laughed at when I seen the option to split test the title. I was like, I'm not sure who's doing that, but maybe I need to find somebody that's doing it. Awesome. So can you share some of the do's and don'ts of a successful Amazon advertising strategy?
Sure. When we're looking at like Amazon advertising strategy, first thing is look at holistically, right? When we do the Amazon action plan, we do the analysis, we identify the top winners, what's making the largest percentage of that, what are your margins? Like first thing on Amazon, know your freaking margins, right? It's real easy to go in there and, be making a 20% margin going, hey, that's great after the fee and the shipping. But then you find out that you have a 40% A cost on something, right? Sure. Now that's not looking at tacos, and I'll have the conversation about tacos at second level, but know your unit economics because you have to understand where you are. Here's the, kind of take home. Normally, depending on how competitive your market is, your tacos, which is your total advertising cost of sale, is anywhere from 5%, and I've seen it as low as 1% to 20%. Right? So you basically just take 1 to 20% off your margin and say, this is what I'm going to use for advertising as a whole for my brand. Right? So if that's going on, then if you have a 20% margin and it's 20%, you're doing all this work for nothing, right? If you have a 45% margin, well, that makes more sense. And we typically see that higher tacos number in more premium brand categories, more expensive items where there's a lot of competition, right? That's not the norm. I'd say the norm, once you're established, you're up and running, you got good velocity, is, tacos of 5 to 10% across the board. So the second thing that's really the big do's and don'ts of advertising on Amazon is having the ACoS conversation without having the tacos conversation, right? Because they're in Amazon and their dashboard, they lead you to that. You go and you look at your ACoS for this, but there's no way to easily source what your total revenue is based on the ad spend. Now, ACoS or return on ad spend in the normal world makes sense, right? Because if you're running Facebook campaigns to e-commerce website or anything like that, I spend $5, I sell $20 worth of product. Great, I got a 4 ROAS, or in this case, a 25% ACoS, right? And that works great for Facebook or Google or any of those type of things. But how Amazon is different is Amazon's flywheel, the more sales you make, the higher you rank organically, right? So what happens on Amazon is I spend $5, I made $20 based on that ad spend, but then I actually sold 100 because of organic, right? So now or 80, right? So we'll keep it even numbers. So 20 based on ad spend, 80 organically. So that means that your tacos is 5%, right? Of the whole thing. It's not 25%, it's 5% because you're fueling your organic rank with that. And that's a major difference between the two platforms. So on occasion, we'll run campaigns that we're particularly with brands that are subscription brands or higher long-time lifetime value brands, or anything like this. We'll sometimes run ACoS at, above 50%, because ACoS is not the thing we're looking at. It's tacos at the end of the day. And what percentage of that is of your overall spend is, and how much is fending off competition from your listing, gaining these additional areas, doing those.
So to dig into that a little bit, because I think it's crucial, especially as hopefully we're not, but as we're kind of heading into a recession and entrepreneurs and business, we're actually like trying to squeeze out as much profit as we can, right? And so tacos is a really large conversation if you're running a full-time business and relying on that, because I've been in a situation before where selling everything at a 30% ACoS or 35% ACoS and not monitoring organic will run you into the ground. And so to your point of tacos, let's take so 2 questions here. First one is, when you launch a product, let's say we're selling it's a $100 product and we're sourcing it for 25, so we have and we're selling it for 100, pretty good margins. And how long do you ramp that up to like a higher ACoS for, let's say, a launch period until you get it ranking, until you pull back into a maintenance? So what is your standard one that you're seeing for your clients?
Where we find the organic side is how sticky is it, right? So I can spend a ton of money and rank from a sponsor position for number 1 for white socks selling a black sock, right? That black sock listing is never going to organically rank for that term because it's not relative. It's not the right fit. It's a variety of things, right? So what we typically do is run the pay-per-click campaigns, run the auto campaign, and then, do the overall strategy, run auto, and then based on finding the winners, then you make, kind of the broad modified, and then you take it down to phrase and exact, and that kind of general strategy of, mining and building it out from there. But once you find those winners that you're actually getting a good conversion rate on pay-per-click, then we go really hard at ranking for those, right? The key with that is not to just run the pay-per-click side of this, but to run in the keywords and update the keywords on your listing too. And the priority with that, is I'm sure and majority of your listeners know, Ken, is title is where the main keywords are, right? And then you have the body of the copy, and only the first 1,000 words are indexed, right? So If you're building out stuff that's past 2,000 words, you're wasting time and money on that. Don't do that. And then you have the back end terms, right? So you look at the priority, you look at keywords, and a lot of people miss this with keywords is if I have white hat, best white hat to buy now, and I'm ranking for all those keywords, you don't have to worry about ranking white hat because you already have white hat and best white hat to buy now, right? So how do you stack those keywords in a way that makes a lot of sense with the frequency and some of these other things, right? But without identifying the product first, what's actually converting for you and what's happening in that, and then integrating in that the text, you're never going to rank. Once you get to that level and you go aggressively, there's a lot of variables going on that, but we typically recommend going aggressively on it for a minimum of a month until you get up there stuck and you're sticking up there. And then once you're sticking up there, go for another month or 6 weeks, right? Because Amazon likes continuity and you don't want to spend all this money to get there to then drop down because of that.
So you're seeing with a lot of your clients, you're seeing between that 8-10 week range of ramping up, making sure it sticks, and then kind of backing down after 8 or 10 weeks.
And, as in split testing, as in all these type of things, the things that really change are that you have to test your conversion rate and run that auto campaign and run some of these things almost every time you hit the next review rate model, right? So like if you go from 60 reviews to 100 reviews, you're going to be converting significantly more at 100 reviews. If you go from 100 reviews to 1,000 reviews, you're going to be converting a lot more on that level. So you have to rerun the analysis ever so often to find out what's actually converting now compared to yesterday.
Yeah, that is crucial. I agree. And if you're listening and you have listings that are 2 or 3 years old or 5 years old and you haven't done anything to them, go back and refresh them and rerun them, because you're right, Ryan. Like conversion rates will be different. Lots of things will be different, and that's something that we've been adding into our own portfolio companies this year, was like really refreshing the listings on like a quarterly or at least a biannual basis, on going back through, seeing if there's a new keyword, seeing what's out there, because the ecosystem and environment change, competitors change, Amazon changes, so everything changes.
All of it.
Yeah, and it always changes. So one more follow-on question, because I think it's an interesting one and very relevant, is the tacos model. And so you had mentioned, seeing 5 to 10% tacos there. I think 5% tacos is amazing. And so what levers, and so let's say, so we just did the 8 to 10 week launch, right? So we launched this product 8 to 10 weeks, got it ranking. And so we're kind of going to go into a little bit of a maintenance mode now. So we're going to back off, lower the ACOS, and that now, how are you measuring, and what levers are you pulling for the tacos in terms of, are you measuring like keyword ranking for certain keywords that you're going after, and then measuring those organic sales? Like, what's the process there?
Yeah, so tacos, I mean, it's a simple, the hard thing, right, is looking at it under a microscope compared to the macro level, right? Because anybody can say, here's the product line, right? Here is the black sock we were talking about. We'll go with the black shoe to kind of stay true to our early shoe conversation, right?
Sure.
But you have that one, and you're looking at that, you say, well, what is ad spend? What is total sales? Let's divide that up, and what's the number, right? Now, what you need to look at with that is, you can kind of do that general level. The hard thing is you don't get the keyword data on the organic side. So I could tell you the conversion rate and all those type of things based on keyword, based on the pay-per-click and the advertising side. But organically, I don't know what you're converting. Right?
Sure.
So you can't really close that loop. Some different things have been coming out in brand analytics.
Yeah.
But that's typical brand analytics. That's not necessarily isolated to the product that you're looking at. Right? But I'm hoping there's more movement on that in the future. But that's where you kind of want to be able to identify what's happening and those type of things. There's also the other big factor of multi-channel, right? So we represent some brands that have like a 1% tacos, right?
Nice.
But they have huge brand exposure, right? They're in CVS nationally, they have all these type of things, or they're a big influencer or whatnot. People are just already have brand affinity, so they're coming there. Now, with that, there's capabilities to go in and really put up your dukes and defend your brand, because you just don't want people doing that, and that happens all the time. But the other side of it is you can start doing conquesting, right? Based on that, what you can do through, the Amazon console to some levels, but what you really can do through Amazon DSP and some of those things is really do aggressive conquesting on your competitors too, of the like mind of that premium value, right? So that's kind of the argument for the multi-channel stuff. And Ken, I'm kind of going away from your original question, so I apologize that.
Yeah, no worries.
I feel like a politician here. What I'm saying is you can track that. You can look at the conversion rate based on some data to find out what is that converting at. You can look at your key metrics based on your pay-per-click and then draw some assumptions from that per campaign that you're that's essentially what you do. But you always look at the macro level for that one listing. What are the tacos at? What's going on? And where are they? Right. So you're tracking the keywords on those individual listings. You're tracking the conversion rate based on your pay-per-click campaigns. You're slowly minimizing how much you're bidding on those campaigns and on those keywords. So it's kind of all of them. Now, to answer your initial question, the bigger question here is, particularly as Amazon matures, as we go into more of a recession, as these things, is really brand. And what are you not just doing on Amazon, but what are you doing multi-channel? So when we work with clients, a lot of people want to do TikTok and Facebook and Insta like immediately, right? As soon as they got a listing. And you can do that on TikTok. TikTok's a great venue for you, but you're selling yourself short if you don't at least put up a Shopify website, use Amazon MCF. You can use Amazon to fulfill all your orders on your Shopify site, so you don't have to worry about that headache, right? You can do those things, and Amazon has multi-channel fulfillment. You can Google it, Amazon multi-channel fulfillment. You can sync that way. But before you start doing all the big social media pushes or any of those type of things, get up a website, because when you do those, what you're going to see is your Amazon sales are going to go up and your Shopify website sales are going up. And I typically say Shopify because that's what we work in. We did WooCommerce for a number of years. Do yourself a favor. Shopify, in our opinion, is by far the best shopping platform, because they're launching marketplaces. They easily integrate to distribute to Etsy. They do a ton of things that just make your life a little easier. In fact, YouTube just launched shopping through YouTube on a Shopify platform. Where Amazon's making their play within their ecosystem, Shopify is making the website we integrate with all the other solutions to the best ability play on the market, right? Okay. So on the multi-channel side, if you're going to do the big brand, push social media, do any of those type of things, stand up a Shopify website, because you'll see that your sales will increase on your Shopify. You're not giving that 15% to Amazon, even if they're doing the fulfillment to you, and your organic sales on Amazon will go up. And when your organic sales on Amazon go up, or sales attributed to people searching for your brand and you advertising it go up, that increases your sales velocity on there as well, right? And the real buyer journey that we see at this point is the litmus test. To give you a quick example, I love this example, but I saw a Facebook ad for this mosquito zapper that was developed out by a 13-year-old kid and got $25 million of funding and was supposed to kill mosquitoes for, a mile. I'm like, oh, I need this. I hate mosquitoes, like everybody would, right? Yeah. And then I go look at the Amazon reviews and it has like 2.5 stars. And I'm like, oh, I'm not buying this, right? And that's the journey that happens. So as the marketplaces mature and they go through this, you really have to start thinking of your multi-channel strategy and what you're doing across the board.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was reading a stat, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, about customer research and how Amazon is becoming more and more the place where, instead of Google, where shoppers are just researching, price testing, and they're bouncing around. And so, yeah, I think there's, to your point, multi-channel is having a presence. If you're building a brand, which you should be, having a presence on Shopify, Amazon, and so shoppers can find you more places and more sales. So,
well, and you've already done more than half the work. If you have optimized listings on Amazon, port those over to your Shopify, get those up, and you already have a good looking website that has great graphic, annotated images. You can pull the reviews over. You can do a variety of things like that to pass the literacy test, right?
yeah, exactly. It's low hanging fruit. If you don't have a Shopify store and you're building a brand, you definitely should have one.
Yeah.
So,
Amazon's 48% of e-commerce in the United States, and Shopify is about 35% of product search, right? So between the two, you got 90% of product search.
yeah, that's a pretty staggering statistic, and I think we have a lot more opportunity out there in terms of overall retail. So the next decade will be fun for sure.
That's what I could do. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's see here. Can you explain what is growth driven advertising 101 and where does someone begin?
Yeah. So growth driven advertising is something that we practice here, and it only works for kind of those hero listings, right? Because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and essentially the first step is what we do is the Amazon action plan, the analysis of your overall catalog to identify what are your top sellers, what are the best opportunities. Of those top sellers, we typically identify 3 or 4 when we go through this level. What's going on in Amazon, right? So the best thing about Amazon, there's a whole bunch of data, so you can actually do segment analysis based on the top searched items for the keywords that you're looking at, the best performing ones out there. What's the market's growth rate? What are all these other things that are happening? And more importantly, what's your market share in that area for your top sellers, right? So you can analyze what are you doing, where do you perform compared to everybody else on that price area, all those things. You can potentially aggregate some product families to increase your reviews on those levels. And then what we do is start running the pay-per-click campaigns, start mining the highest keyword relevant information from that. And then we say, hey, we recommend that you integrate these in your listings because these are the keywords that are converting. Here's our best practices on how to do it. You integrate it into your listings on that. Then we start looking at split testing and say, hey, Ken, like we really want a lip liner with somebody putting the lips on there. Can you get me that image? You can provide that image and we can start split testing it. And then what we do through this process is you don't focus on 500 listings at a time with this. You focus on your winning listings, the listings that are actually funding what you're doing with your brand. And then you basically increase the sales for that. And then the biggest thing that we do is we do the literacy test of how are we increasing compared to the market, right? So particularly in a recession, Amazon's been growing 100% plus year over year for a very long time. Not the case depending on the category now. It's getting more competitive. There are still some of those categories out there, don't get me wrong, but it is getting more competitive. So what you need to pace yourself is what is the competition doing and how are we doing it? Like, maybe our tacos went up by 5%, but we gained 30% market share over the competition, right? So we're slowly inking out the competition. They're going to go out eventually, right? So because it's very easy if you're not looking at the segment that you're actually playing in to say, hey, we're growing 20% month over month. We're kicking ass. I'm really happy about this compared to looking at the segment and saying the segment's actually growing at 200% year over year. And we only got a tenth of that. We're actually losing a ton of market share because we're not doing something right. Or vice versa, we're down 20%. Oh my God, this is horrible. Everything's not working, to find out that your market is down 50%. Right? So you have to understand what that's doing, track that to be able to make really data-driven decisions on how you're doing based on the competition, what's going on in the market, and how you're really building.
Yeah, I like that. That's a solid plan. And one thing that I would definitely urge listeners to have is a solid plan instead of just throwing a bunch of stuff at a wall and see what sticks. Is have a plan and have it go out over 6 months or 12 months and slowly get that flywheel going and build onto it, using that 80-20 as well, focusing on the top listing. So I like that.
How we form long-term relationships is we work closest to the wallet the way out, because that's how we fund people working with us too, right? Like,
Sure.
so that's, it's a really bad conversation if you're charging people thousands a month and 6 months later, they haven't seen the needle move, right? You want to kind of have really good results within the first 3 months.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Grab the lowest hanging fruit early and make the biggest impact. So I like that. Well, cool. I definitely want to be respectful of your time, Ryan. So let's talk a little bit about Nuanced Media. What are your specialties, and what kind of customer is a good fit for you and your team?
Yeah, so we really work on, so the major thing that Nuance does is growth driven advertising. We do have full service agency as well if you need listings built and done all of those type of things. But where we typically come in for most of our partners is doing the growth driven advertising and really running that if you have the capabilities to do good graphic design and implement and all those things. If you don't, then it's more of a full service play, right? But with that being said, the clients that we typically and partners that we typically like to work with are established clients that are either kind of stagnant on their growth or really looking to grow aggressively. We're getting a ton of people right now that have been kind of used and abused by other agencies because they're not really looking at the multi-faceted areas of like everything that's going on. And you have people that are losing market share and maybe they haven't looked at their segment as completely normal or it's not. Right. So our ideal client that we work with is an established brand that, at least on an annual basis, they have a listing doing over 100 to 200,000 a year on that, because that's when it starts saying, well, can we increase these sales by 3 or 4x? And what does that look like? Right. And you have to be that. The lower level ones, we can work with you on those things, but you have to have a certain amount of data and sales before you can even turn on split testing in Amazon, for example.
Well, awesome. We have a fire round for every guest. We put them through the ringer, and we've named it the fire round. So, are you ready?
Sure.
What is your favorite book?
The Power of One by Bryce Conroy.
Excellent. What are your hobbies?
I like to read books, play with my 3-year-old, so I'm getting back into that. And I'm teaching her how to game and do all that. But I'm a big strategic gamer as well. So I'm a D&D nerd from like way back when, like 2nd edition. But I do a whole bunch of gaming. I do a Sunday gaming thing with my guy friends. It's fun.
Okay, like video games or like D&D
board games, like
board
strategic
games.
board, like Dune, for example, and like.
Okay.
But like, it's a great game if you haven't played it, man. It's phenomenal. And there's
awesome.
Even squirrel games out there. They don't have to be as scary as Dune.
What is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Being accountable to one person, right? Basically, you have kind of the fate of your life in somebody else's hands, so that can kind of keep you up at night.
Sure, absolutely agree. Last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
Dedication, a bit of insanity or delusion of grandeur. I know I'm delusional myself with some of the things that I've done or kind of cast out there. And then honestly, having a fiscal mind, like looking at your margins, understanding what the real revenue is, having a real good sense of that.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent advice. Really appreciate you coming on the show, Ryan. How can guests contact you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn if you want to reach out to me that way. You can also contact me through nuancedmedia.com. We also have a Amazon growth strategy guide. If you go to nuancedmedia.com, it's a pop-up. So if you wait, 3 seconds or so, it'll pop up and it'll kind of give you a lot of the growth-driven advertising things that we were talking about today. You can get on the email list and all those type of things. And then I'm also on Twitter. And it's all at Ryan Flannagan. Look in the show notes. Flannagan is spelled with 3 N's, so like no one has the spelling. So it should be
yeah, I'm going to fix that one. So yeah, if you're listening and you're in need of advertising for Amazon, reach out to Ryan and his team, and they'll hook you up. Really appreciate you coming on the show today, Ryan, and sharing all your knowledge. It was awesome, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, Ken, it was great. Looking forward. Would love to hop on again at some point.
Absolutely.